Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Wall Street is in turmoil. Recession fears are rising in the US and President Donald Trump is making it worse. American stock markets lost over $1 trillion yesterday and $4 trillion in just a month. $4 trillion in losses. Investors are on the edge, of course, because the worst may not be over. Trump's April 2 deadline is approaching. In about 2 weeks from now, he plans to escalate his trade war. America's biggest trading partners are on target, including possibly India. Donald Trump claims New Delhi will lower tariffs for him. But India says no such commitment has been made. India wants a win-win deal, a balanced deal, one that benefits both sides. We'll tell you about New Delhi's position. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine is trying to strike a deal of its own. As Ukraine, in fact, steps up attacks on Russian territories, Zelensky is desperate for a breakthrough. We'll tell you if he made any progress. Prime Minister Modi is in Mauritius. We'll discuss why India's relationship with this island nation is so significant. Also in focus, why former President Rodrigo Duterte was arrested in the Philippines. The Dalai Lama says his successor will be born outside China. But is the world still interested? And why millions of Indians are struggling to sleep. First, the headlines. In Pakistan, armed militants hold hundreds of train passengers hostage. The siege in the Balochistan province is ongoing. The gunmen bombed the railway track before taking control of the train. There are more than 400 passengers on board. The Baloch Liberation Army has claimed responsibility for this attack. Al-Shabaab terrorists storm a hotel in central Somalia. The attackers rammed an explosives-laden vehicle into the hotel. At least 4 people have been killed in the shooting that followed. The attack took place while the hotel was hosting a crucial meeting. It was to support the Somali government's fight against the terror group. Portugal braces for its third general election in many years as the Prime Minister is set to lose a vote of confidence. He is facing many allegations of conflicts of interest involving his family business. The Prime Minister has been in office for barely a year. A US judge orders Elon Musk's Doge to release its internal records, saying that the agency's work has been shrouded in unusual secrecy. President Trump has tasked the agency to slash the size of the US government. Doge has already cut thousands of government jobs and appended agencies. And Manchester United will leave Old Trafford. They plan to build a new 100,000 capacity stadium close to their historic home. The new stadium will be the largest in the UK. It will be completed in 5 years. Old Trafford has been the English club's home since 1910. More than $1 trillion. That's how much US stocks lost in yesterday's trade. It was their worst drop since September 2022. And what triggered this fall? The question, in fact, should be who triggered this fall? And the unanimous answer is President Donald Trump. Yesterday, we told you about the fear of recession in America. Many experts believe the US could enter a recession this year. So President Trump was asked about it, about whether he thinks there will be a recession. And Trump uncharacteristically refused to rule out the possibility.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America.
A period of transition. That's how President Trump described it. The question, as you saw, was simple and straightforward. Are you expecting a recession this year? Trump could have just said no and avoided the market Armageddon. Instead, he gave an ambiguous response, and that is something that investors hate. They loathe uncertainty. It rattles them. So when Trump gave a non-committal response, they decided to pull their investments. And this triggered a market collapse. Some of America's biggest companies took a hit, including and especially the tech sector. Big tech is among Donald Trump's biggest supporters, and they were among the worst affected by this market collapse. Trump's comments hit them hard. America's biggest technology companies lost some $750 billion in all in one day's trade, $750 billion. The list includes giants like Apple. The iPhone maker lost some $174 billion in a day. Microsoft's value fell by $98 billion. Google's parent company Alphabet lost $95 billion. Amazon $50 billion, and Facebook's parent company Meta lost $70 billion. Even Tesla was not spared, despite President Trump's vocal support for Elon Musk, or perhaps because of it, Tesla is struggling. Musk is practically living in the White House. He's being called the co-president of America. He wields immense power in the Trump administration, but none of this has impressed investors. Tesla shares plunged by 15% yesterday. That's a $125 billion loss in a single day, $125 billion. In fact, Tesla has lost more than half of its value since December 2024. Some $800 billion have been wiped out in 3 months. This is $800 billion from Tesla's market capitalization, gone in less than 3 months. When Trump won the election, Elon Musk's companies witnessed a rally. It was called the Trump bump. Because Elon Musk had bet on a Trump victory, he financed Donald Trump's campaign, and that bet paid off. Trump became the US president, and Musk received a handsome reward. He was appointed as a senior advisor to the president. And the man who's running DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE is fundamentally reshaping the US government. It has ordered mass layoffs from various government departments. It has killed contracts worth billions of dollars, so Elon Musk's influence has become a matter of debate. Trump's cabinet members have questioned it. Despite all of the controversy and the backlash, Trump continues to support Musk. So much so that he now wants to buy a Tesla as a show of support for Elon Musk. Trump has blamed what he calls radical left lunatics for the Tesla slump. He says these left lunatics are boycotting Tesla, which is why the stock is falling. But what about the rest of the market? Are lunatics now sabotaging the American market too? Or is this a crisis of confidence for the president? Because investors, irrespective of their political leaning, have been gradually pulling out of US stocks over the past month. The S&P 500 in the last 1 month has lost $4 trillion in value. This index, S&P 500, tracks America's top 500 companies. It has lost $4 trillion in about a month. Overall, the market sentiment is bearish, and the reason for that are Trump's tariffs. His trade war with America's biggest partners, countries like Canada, Mexico, and China, has made investors wary. They don't like the constant back and forth. It is fueling uncertainty, and we've seen 2 instances already of this back and forth. Trump announces tariffs on US trade partners only to roll them back and then declare a new deadline. Now the date is April 2nd. That's when Trump says he will impose sweeping tariffs.
You're worried about a recession. Maria Bartiromo asked you, and you kind of hesitated.
I'll tell you what, of course you hesitate. Who knows? All I know is this: we're going to take in hundreds of millions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch.
Trump's tariffs are draining global investors. Markets around the world are bleeding. Japan's Nikkei fell by almost 1%. South Korean markets lost about 1.3%. South Korea's acting president has spoken about this. He says America first is hurting his country.
The arrow of Trump's America First policies have started targeting our country. President Trump has recently claimed in his congressional speech and other remarks that South Korea's tariffs are unfair and has called for the abolition of subsidies promised to semiconductor companies, signaling all-out pressure.
Indian markets too were trading in the red today. However, by the end of trading day, we saw some recovery. But this chaos is not over yet. Yesterday was particularly bad, yes. It was also a message of sorts from investors to the American president. They are not happy with his handling of the economy. Trump is moving at lightning speed. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is struggling. Forget catching up. It's hard to even keep track of his moves. And that includes India. The US president is sending mixed signals to India. He says he wants a trade deal by the end of this year, but he's also threatening tariffs. Some of his allies call it a pressure tactic, but frankly, it is confusing and destabilizing. And last week we saw an example of that. President Trump claimed that India had agreed to cut its tariffs. Listen to this.
Right down the line, India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. It's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. You know, we do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done.
Turns out we haven't. India's Commerce Secretary has fact-checked Donald Trump. He briefed the parliamentary committee on the tariff situation and he said no such commitment had been made. Yes, talks are underway, but India has not agreed to cut tariffs. That's what the Commerce Secretary said. Now, beyond this, the Secretary made a couple of points. Number one, India wants a mutually beneficial trade deal. It is not focusing on minor tariff tweaks. It wants a long-term deal, something that will settle this issue once and for all. That's point number one. Number two, India is committed to free trade. The Secretary said that a trade war would not benefit anyone. He also said it could lead to a recession. Number three, India has sought time from the United States until September later this year, which fits the timeline agreed by both Trump and Modi. Point number four that the Commerce Secretary made, India could probably escape reciprocal tariffs. Remember, Trump has set a deadline to impose them. Reciprocal tariffs will kick in on the 2nd of April, but the Indian Commerce Secretary suggested that India could escape it. It's not clear how, though. And finally, point number five, India's muted reactions have a logic. The likes of Canada and Mexico have reacted aggressively to Trump's tariffs, but India has not. The Commerce Secretary attributed this to the nature of the tiff. Trump has border and drug issues with Canada and Mexico. They're both US neighbors. But with India, the issue is purely trade. Hence the different response. Now, full disclosure, these committees meet behind closed doors, so all of this is based on sources and reports. None of it is on record. In public, the government of India is saying very little. It has reaffirmed its commitment to free trade. It has also promised to conclude a trade deal with the United States. And all of this is part of a playbook to handle Donald Trump. From what we have seen, the strategy has multiple parts. The first part is concessions. India has cut tariffs on non-critical items, things like American whiskey and expensive bikes. The idea is to give Trump something to flaunt. The second part of India's strategy is talks. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal was in the US last week. He held talks with Trump's trade envoy, and this week he's meeting Indian industry and trade representatives. The goal is to gauge the impact, to see how the tariffs may hurt India. And finally, the third tactic, keeping it non-confrontational. That is important. Trump has been saying a lot of things about India. He's called India tariff king. He's called us a tariff abuser. Last week, he wrongly claimed that India had reduced its tariffs, yet New Delhi has been silent. It is not reacting to every single statement by Donald Trump. Instead, India is looking at his actions. And this approach is not new. A lot of Trump's former advisors have spoken about it. They say, focus on the actions, not on the words. Consider the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. In his statements, Donald Trump keeps threatening tariffs. But he's paused and delayed it twice, which suggests that he is not as serious about them as he claims. Nonetheless, he is the President of the United States of America, so you have to prepare for all eventualities. India's challenge is to strike a balance. Most people agree that our tariffs have to be reworked. Some of them are way too high. But it's crucial to not go too far, to protect critical industries and to defend certain barriers. Let's see if New Delhi can strike that balance.
I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I want this. Look.
The Americans are back in Saudi Arabia. It's the same team that met the Russians last month. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Even the mediator is the same, the Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal. Other than that, everything is different. The Americans met the Russians in Riyadh last month, but this meeting is happening in Jeddah. And sitting across the American team are the Ukrainians. Two of them are leading this delegation. One is President Zelensky's advisor, and the second is Ukraine's defense minister. In simple words, this is a damage control mission. I'm sure you remember the meeting between Zelensky and Trump. It was a disaster, to say the least, and after that disaster, things went downhill. The US froze military aid to Ukraine. They also cut off intelligence sharing. So now Kiev is trying to make things right. Hence this meeting. Zelensky himself arrived in Saudi Arabia yesterday, but he is not part of the talks. And the agenda? Well, mainly two things. One is the minerals deal. Ukraine will share its mineral wealth with the United States. Trump sees it as payback for US aid. Zelensky sees it as a stepping stone to security guarantees. The second is a peace process. Nobody is expecting a breakthrough. But the US wants to see how genuine Ukraine is. In public, Zelensky has supported Trump's push, but is he really willing to make concessions? That is what the US side is hoping to find out.
We have to understand the Ukrainian position and just have a general idea of what concessions they'd be willing to make, because you're not going to get a ceasefire and an end to this war unless both sides make concessions. It's just obvious. We'll need to see. Maybe we won't go into great details. We're not going to be sitting in a room drawing lines on a map, but just get a general sense of what concessions are in the realm of the possible for them and what they would need in return.
So the US wants to see how genuine Ukraine is, and Ukraine wants to see how genuine Russia is. They are proposing a truce, a halt in fighting everywhere except on land, meaning no drones, no missiles, no rockets. Kiev wants to see if Russia will accept it, if they're genuine about peace. A similar proposal was made by France and Britain that was quickly rejected by Russia. So let's see how they respond to this one. I know it is tempting to see this as an effort to end the war, but frankly it is not. Because to end the war, you need Russia and Ukraine at the same table. These talks are more bilateral in nature. Both Ukraine and Russia are trying to get Donald Trump on their side. That's what this is about. That's what the Riyadh meeting was about. That's what today's meeting was also about, the one in Jeddah. Getting Trump on your side. And which way is Trump leaning? Well, he says it is easier to handle Russia than Ukraine.
President Putin is bombing Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you still believe him when he tells you that he wants peace?
Yeah, no, I believe him. I believe him. I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine. And Ukraine, I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards.
Zelensky is hoping to change that perception. On the one hand, he is talking to the US. On the other, he is taking the attack to Russia. That's right. Ahead of the meeting, Ukraine launched a massive drone attack on Moscow, their largest yet on the Russian capital. Ukraine's largest drone attack on Moscow so far. Pictures showed buildings being blown apart and cars burnt on the streets. Russia says more than 300 drones were fired in total, out of which 91 drones targeted Moscow and over 120 targeted Kursk. Kursk is a region in southern Russia. A portion of Kursk is currently being held by the Ukrainian forces. Reports say 3 people were killed in this latest attack. Take a look. It's a clear message from Ukraine. They're telling Russia, US aid or not, we are very much in the fight, so back off. In response, Russia fired missiles at Ukraine. They hit a fuel depot in Odessa. Take a look at this now. This is not exactly the perfect setting for talks, but then again, it sums up the entire situation. Neither side is open to concessions, evidently. Zelensky has refused to give up Ukraine's territory, and Putin is sitting pretty on the battlefield. He has ruled out any concessions to Ukraine. So where will the breakthrough come from? Well, that's where Donald Trump is key. Last week, he threatened Russia with crippling sanctions. And around the same time, he also cut off military aid to Ukraine. So Trump has levers over both sides. Ukraine more than Russia, of course. It's a question of who he decides to side with, and that is why both Russia and Ukraine are trying to court the US president. Let's see which way he goes. For our next story, let's step back in time. The year was 1834. British ships sliced through the Indian Ocean, carrying loads of human cargo. Hundreds of laborers from India, they were promised work and a better future, a better life than what they were leaving behind. That was the promise. But as they stepped onto the sugar plantations of Mauritius, they found themselves bound to a foreign land. And they ended up becoming a link that still binds India and Mauritius. The first Indians went there more than 2 centuries ago, and today India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in the very same country. He is attending the island's 57th National Day celebration. And tonight we'll tell you why this visit is so crucial, what makes Mauritius such an important friend and partner for India. Let's look at the Prime Minister's visit first. He landed in Port Louis earlier today, where he received a guard of honor and was then greeted by traditional songs. From here, Prime Minister Modi met the President of Mauritius. He gifted him Ganga Jal from the Mahakumbh. Ganga Jal, as some of you would know, is holy water from the river Ganga. He also gifted the president makhana or fox nuts, which is a superfood from the Indian state of Bihar. For the First Lady of Mauritius, Prime Minister Modi brought a Banarsi sari and he gifted it to her in a traditional Sadeli box.
के साथ मुलाकात की है। मॉरिशस के राष्ट्रपति से प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी की मुलाकात हुई है, तो वहां भी प्रधानमंत्री ने कुछ विशिष्ट उपहारों के साथ राष्ट्रपति का अभिनंदन भी किया।
The Mauritian Prime Minister has also awarded the highest civilian award, the country's highest civilian award, to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is the first Indian leader to receive this honour. Now, this visit will last for 2 days. As I said, Prime Minister Modi will attend the National Day celebrations. He will also meet a lot of officials. On the agenda are multiple deals and agreements. Prime Minister Modi says this visit will open a new chapter in India-Mauritius ties. Which brings us to Mauritius. It was first discovered by Arab sailors back in the 10th century. Then the Dutch claimed the islands. They named the archipelago Mauritius in honor of Maurice of Nassau. In the 18th century, the French took control. That's when the first Indians arrived in Mauritius. They were artisans and masons from Puducherry in India, which also happened to be occupied by the French. Puducherry in the southern part of India. Then in the year 1810, the British finally seized control. They needed a workforce for their plantations in Mauritius, so they orchestrated the Great Indian Migration. Ships ferried thousands of workers from Bihar, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh. They built new lives and raised families in this foreign land. And over generations, they became Mauritians, with Indian names and Indian cultural values, but a new national identity. Today, Mauritius has a population of 1.2 million. 70% of them are of Indian origin. Languages spoken on the island include Bhojpuri, Tamil, Telugu, Hindi and Urdu. Diwali, Holi and the Tamil New Year are national celebrations here. The Prime Ministers of Mauritius are of Indian origin. Even the National Day is linked to India. In the year 1901, Mahatma Gandhi landed in Mauritius. He was on his way to South Africa. Gandhi was just a lawyer then, but he had a message for the Indian community there. He told them to educate and organize themselves and reclaim their dignity. This message stayed with the people of Mauritius. So to honor him, they celebrate their National Day on March 12th, the same day as Gandhi began his Dandi March. More than half a century later, in the year 1968, Mauritius became an independent country. Sivasagar Ramgoolam became the first Prime Minister. He too was of Indian origin, and he had close ties with Indian freedom fighters. He once even proofread a book by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Since then, only 2 families have ruled this island nation, the Ramgoolams and the Jugnauts. Sivasagar Ramgoolam's son is the current Prime Minister of Mauritius. So while the relationship spans centuries, ties between India and Mauritius as independent countries deepened after 1968, the year when Mauritius became a free country, when they got independence, 1968. Then in 1974, the 2 countries signed a defense agreement. India became the guarantor of Mauritius's security. And the first challenge came in 1983. There were rumors of a coup being planned by the MMM, the Mauritian Militant Movement. They apparently wanted to take over the island. Reports suggest that India intervened then. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister. She ordered a covert operation called Operation Lal Dora. Apparently, the plan was to send Indian troops to Mauritius in the event of a coup. It did not happen, and it's not something that India has ever accepted. Either way, the coup was averted. And that's not the only time that India has backed Mauritius. There's also the Chagos Islands. It's an archipelago in the Indian Ocean. It was separated from Mauritius by the British. Its largest island, the largest island of the Chagos group, is called Diego Garcia. The British leased it to build a military base there. They still have it. The island now hosts a US military base, Diego Garcia. Mauritius has long wanted the islands back, and India has supported this demand. Even at international forums, India championed Mauritius's cause. And last October came a victory. The UK announced that it would hand over the islands to Mauritius. So from security cover to diplomatic support, India has always stood up for Mauritius. And beyond the friendship, this was also a strategic investment. Because look at where the island nation is situated, in the Indian Ocean. And India has been building assets there of late, especially in the Agalega Islands. They're located 1,100 kilometers north of Mauritius. India has invested in infrastructure in Agalega, like an airstrip and a new jetty. And the reason is quite clear. China is widening its footprint in the Indian Ocean. Agalega gives India a presence to help and to work with partners like Mauritius to counter Beijing's growing influence. And that's not all. India also helps pick the National Security Advisor of Mauritius. It's an arrangement that goes back decades. The Mauritian NSA is always an Indian citizen. Beyond all of this, we also have economic ties. Mauritius is a top source of FDI into India. That's foreign direct investment. India has also poured in over $1.1 billion into development projects there. From metro lines to disaster relief, India has positioned itself as their most reliable ally. India and Mauritius are also reaching for the stars, quite literally. Since 1986, India's space agency ISRO has operated a satellite tracking station in Mauritius. It helps guide India's missions into space. So as Prime Minister Narendra Modi stepped onto Mauritian soil today, he arrived not just as a head of state, but also as a symbol of this relationship, a relationship that is rooted in history, strengthened by strategy, and driven by a shared future. Now we turn to the Philippines. High drama unfolded at the Manila International Airport today. The country's former president, Rodrigo Duterte, was arrested. He was picked up when he landed in the Philippines. And now he is reportedly on a plane to the Netherlands, to The Hague. Because this arrest was carried out at the behest of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which had issued an arrest warrant for Duterte over his so-called war on drugs. Remember, Duterte was president of the Philippines between 2016 and 2022. Thousands of people were killed during that time. The official count is over 6,200, but the real number is said to be much higher, as high as 30,000 according to some estimates. And this is what the ICC has been investigating. Of course, Duterte does not accept any of this. Listen to what he said after his arrest today.
For detention and the basis for detention. So, what is the law and what is the crime that I committed? To me now, the legal basis for my being here, as apparently I was brought here not of my own volition. It's somebody else's. Kung hindi ibang tao, ikaw siguro, because this is your structure. So you have to answer now for the deprivation of liberty.
Duterte's daughter, Veronica, put that video up on social media. She was with him during his arrest. Duterte's supporters are furious at this turn of events. They were protesting today outside the airbase where he was reportedly being held. They also showed up at the Manila airport in large numbers. They chanted his name while he was being arrested.
I'm sad, dismayed, and angry at what happened. Duterte is old and he did not deserve what they did to him. What he did was for the Philippines. The time that he was the president was peaceful. There was less crime and there was order when he was in power. He did not deserve this treatment.
Rodrigo Duterte is a polarizing figure. To his supporters, he was tough on crime. He is said to have made the Philippines safer. But his detractors say that he upended law and order. He encouraged extrajudicial killings without any regard to due process.
Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there's a 3 million drug addicts. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them.
The police was given free rein. They killed with impunity and then planted evidence to justify the slaughter. These are the charges. The International Criminal Court has been investigating all of this. During Duterte's presidency, they were investigating, so he simply withdrew from it. He pulled the Philippines out of the ICC. His lawyers say that this makes today's arrest unlawful because the Philippines is not part of the ICC anymore. The ICC still claims to have jurisdiction, though, over crimes committed before Duterte withdrew. His lawyers are not happy. This is what they said.
I feel that they're being deprived of his legal rights. Even as former president, huwag mo nang pansinin yun, basta tao, Pilipino, you are entitled to all the constitutional rights as provided by our Constitution.
That seems a little tone deaf. Duterte, of all people, should not complain about legal constitutional rights. The families of his drug war victims held vigils today. They say his arrest is the first step towards justice. But it may not be that simple. You see, the Philippines is also gearing up for midterm elections. They will take place in the month of May. On one side, you have the current president. His name is Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. On the other side, you have the vice president. Her name is Sara Duterte, and yes, she is Rodrigo Duterte's daughter. Sara was initially an ally of the current president Marcos Jr., but last year they had a falling out, and their feud has been escalating. Sara even threatened to have Marcos assassinated. And for this, she was impeached last month. But she has not removed from her post. Now Sara Duterte's father has been arrested just before an election. Will this result in a sympathy vote for her? Will it allow her to undermine President Marcos and eventually free her father? We'll find out in a few weeks. Now let's turn our attention to Greenland. This Arctic island is home to about 56,000 people, and today they are going to polls. Historically, the island's elections rarely make global headlines. But this year, all eyes are on the ballot because Greenland has exploded into geopolitical significance thanks to US President Donald Trump. He has openly and repeatedly talked about acquiring the island. So what does this election mean for Trump and the people of Greenland? Here's a report.
Residents flocking to the booths, political parties pitching tents outside, campaigners offering hot drinks and cake, election workers being cheered on. It's clear that the mood is festive at the Seoul polling station in the capital city of Nuuk as Greenland goes to polls. Greenland is the largest island in the world. It is thinly populated and home to just 56,000 people. Its elections usually attract only local attention. But this year, the island has drawn outsized global attention after it exploded into geopolitical significance thanks to US President Donald Trump.
I think this is one of the most important elections we've ever had, or that we'll vote in, also because there's so much focus on Greenland at the moment around the world.
Here's a little context. Greenland is controlled by Denmark, which is nearly 3,000 kilometers away. And it has been this way for about 300 years now. Though Greenland governs its own domestic affairs, its decisions on defense and foreign policy are made by Copenhagen. Since 2009, the island has wanted independence. It has sought to break free from Denmark. Earlier this year, their Prime Minister said that the territory should free itself from the shackles of colonialism unlike ever before. This debate has taken center stage in the country's elections and on the world stage because it has been quote-unquote put on steroids by Trump.
Because of the attention now, growing attention from the world, I mean from Trump's statements and the pressure also a little bit towards the Danish state and so on, the independence question has popped up again as a major theme in the election campaign.
You see, this island is rich in mineral resources, rare earth minerals which are called the key to driving the global economy. Plus, Greenland occupies a strategic location in the North Atlantic. It's located halfway between Russia and the United States. So Trump wants Greenland. He has openly and repeatedly declared his intent to acquire it.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it.
But most Greenlanders show no sign of wanting to become Americans. Greenland and Denmark's leaders have repeatedly rebuffed Trump's demands.
We don't want to be Danes. We don't want to be Americans. We want to be Greenlandic. And of course, it is the Greenlandic people who decide their future.
Now, independence is the biggest issue on Greenland's ballot. 6 parties are contesting the elections. 5 out of those favor independence. After all, Trump's interest has stoked calls for the island to break away from Denmark.
I strongly believe all this interest from Trump and the rest of the world is definitely speeding up our independence process with times 100.
The question remains, will Greenland break free? What will become of its relationship with Denmark? Will the island break its shackles only to wear new American ones? The island has a relatively small electorate, so within a few hours, the world should have its answer.
From one imperialist holding to another, Tibet. In the 1980s and 1990s, it was all the rage. World leaders, Hollywood actors, rights activists, all of them would speak out for Tibet, for its independence from China. But today, the movement seems to have lost its momentum. The world appears to have moved on. It's sad but true. Yesterday, March 10th, was Tibet Uprising Day. On that day in 1959, Tibetans rose up in revolt against China, and the response was brutal. China's crackdown killed tens of thousands of Tibetans. Their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, was forced to flee. Since then, he stayed in India as the most high-profile refugee in the world. Now, the Dalai Lama is 89 years old. He will turn 90 in July this year. So naturally, there are questions about his successor. Who will lead the Tibetans in the future? Well, the Dalai Lama has an answer. He says his successor will be born outside China, in the free world, as he called it. Let me first explain what the belief is. The Dalai Lama is not a person. It is a position. The spiritual and political leader of Tibet is called the Dalai Lama. When he dies, he is believed to reincarnate. His soul is transferred to the body of a child. That is the belief. The current Dalai Lama has been very cagey about his successor. Once he said the system would end with him. On another occasion, he said his successor would be a woman. And now he says the successor will be born outside China. Of course, Beijing is having none of it. The communist rulers are feeling a sudden love for religion. They are now pointing to Tibetan traditions. They say the next Dalai Lama must come from China. Listen to this.
The 14th Dalai Lama is a political exile who engages in anti-China separatist activities under the cloak of religion and has no right to represent the Tibetan people at all. Respecting and protecting the inheritance of Tibetan Buddhism, including the inheritance of the Dalai Lama, should abide by the laws and regulations of the state, follow religious rituals and historical conventions, and follow the method of domestic searching and lot drawing from the golden urn.
You cannot make this up. China is saying we must protect Tibetan Buddhism. This is the same China that demolished monasteries, that slaughtered Tibetan monks. Then why the sudden religious awakening? Because of politics. If China can control the next Dalai Lama, they can control Tibetans, basically create a puppet leader. But for that, the successor must come from China. If they're born in India, for example, China will not be able to control them. Hence this tussle over succession. Expect more clarity by July this year. That's when the Dalai Lama will turn 90. He says he will reveal more details on his successor by then, which brings us to the larger story here, the story of the Tibetan movement. We're talking about a very proud people, very proud and very distinct. Their culture is thousands of years old. So they had every right to resist Chinese occupation. But that's not why the West supported them. Their reason, the reason for Western support, was purely political. Tibet was a useful tool for the Americans in the 1980s, the 1990s, and then the 2000s. A tool to keep China in check, a tool to build pressure on the Chinese. Every US president since 1990 had met the Dalai Lama. A streak that ended with Donald Trump. He did not meet the Dalai Lama during his first term, nor did his successor Joe Biden, because by then, the US was more focused on Taiwan. And that sums up the problem, really. All this support was never based on principle, it was based on strategic advantage. You think the Americans care about Taiwan's self-rule? No, they care about putting pressure on China. In Europe, you think they care about Ukraine's sovereignty? Evidently not. They care about checking Russia. It's a lesson for people and movements around the world. Pick your supporters carefully. See what they're really after. As for the Tibetans, this is a crucial period. The Dalai Lama wrote an op-ed recently. He has reiterated his offer to Xi Jinping. Let me quote from what he said. Despite Tibet's historical status, I have believed and still believe that the Tibetan people can thrive with their distinct identity, language and culture on the Tibetan plateau while remaining within the People's Republic of China. Basically, he's pitching a political solution. We will stay within China's fold, but we want more autonomy and rights. China will never agree to that. If they do, similar demands will pop up elsewhere, like in Xinjiang or Inner Mongolia. Tibet's best hope is the looming succession. It will indeed be a day of grief, but it will also present them with an opportunity to once again seize the headlines, to once again revitalize their movement. Because this is a people who deserve freedom, not China's repression. Our next story is from Syria. Yesterday we told you about the violence that erupted there between the new rebel-led government and Syria's Alawite minority. Today's story is also about a minority there, the Kurdish people. Thankfully, it's good news this time. Syria's government has signed an agreement with the Kurds. They have agreed to absorb the Kurds into the new Syrian state. Kurdish people have been recognized as an integral part of Syria, and they have been promised their right to representation. On the surface, this seems like a breakthrough, and it was met with optimism and cheers. Here's our report.
Syria's foreign ministry has put out this video. It shows two of the country's most powerful fighters together, both suited up and signing documents. On the right is Syria's new interim president, Ahmed al-Shara. He led the rebel group HTS, the group that ousted former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last December. He is now in charge of the country. On the left is Mazloum Abdi, the leader of the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. This is a US-backed militia led by Kurdish people. The Kurds are an ethnic group spread across multiple nations. They are a minority in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. The SDF Kurdish militia has been instrumental in fighting terrorism. They fought alongside the US against the Islamic State. The SDF helped bring about ISIS's downfall. This brought vast territory under SDF control. The group set up a parallel government there, not under the control of Bashar al-Assad, nor the rebels that opposed him. But their de facto autonomy has been questioned recently, ever since the Syrian rebels ousted Bashar al-Assad. Ahmed al-Shara and his group said that they wanted to unite Syria, not let it splinter into multiple states. To achieve this, it was essential to reach a deal with the Kurds, to bring their territory under Damascus's control, and it seems this has finally been accomplished. Mazloum Abdi put up this post. He says that the new agreement is an opportunity to build a new Syria. The news was greeted with joy in Kurdish-controlled territory.
We congratulate the Syrian revolution, in which brought together all sections. We want to end the bloodshed. The whole people are happy, and they are all one hand, Kurds, Christians, Assyrians, and all other sections. We are all brothers in one country. We seek freedom, and this is it.
As a Kurd and a Syrian citizen, I am happy with the terms of the agreement and the end of the war in Syria after 14 years of conflict. This marks the dawn of freedom. Though the timing is not ideal due to the tragedy our brothers and sisters on the coast are enduring.
Last week, Syria saw its worst outbreak of violence since Bashar al-Assad's ouster. The new rebel-led government forces clashed with Assad loyalists from his Alawite community. The violence left about 1,000 civilians dead. Syria's Kurds protested against the killings today.
My message is for the Syrian blood to stop. We are all brothers, whether Christian, Arab, Kurdish, Druze, or of any sect, and Jews too. In Syria, we are all brothers. This is what the Prophet taught us.
Some Kurdish people may still be wary of the new government, especially after last week's bloodshed, but their options are also limited right now. The Kurds managed to set up their autonomous region with US support, to the tune of over $180 million last year. But US President Donald Trump may cut funding for them, despite all their help against the Islamic State. Meanwhile, Turkish-backed militias have been stepping up attacks against the Kurds, so the autonomous Kurdish area was alone and surrounded. Negotiating with Damascus was probably the best thing to do in this situation. With the new deal, hopefully, peace can come to the Kurds of Syria.
Now to the big story from Pakistan. There's been a major insurgent attack in Balochistan. A train has been hijacked by militants in the area. The Jafar Express, which was going from Quetta to Peshawar. More than 400 people were on board this train. Out of this, around 180 are being held hostage and at least 11 have been killed. We are talking about a massive attack here, the likes of which we only see in the movies. First, let's look at how the hijack happened and who did it. The BLA have claimed responsibility for it. The BLA is the Baloch Liberation Army. It's an armed separatist group in Pakistan's Balochistan province. The terrain there is extremely rugged, so the railway lines have a lot of tunnels. The BLA reportedly used that to their advantage. They fired upon the train and trapped it inside a tunnel. After that, they blew up tracks in the vicinity. Then the BLA fighters boarded the train and took people hostage. Around 100 security personnel were also inside, and they too were taken hostage. In total, the BLA claims 182 people are in their custody. They also claim 11 people were killed. They have issued a warning to Pakistan security forces. If you intervene, there will be severe consequences. And what is the Pakistan government doing? They have declared an emergency in the area. They've also rushed helicopters and security personnel to the train. But as things stand, this is a live hostage situation and the BLA is still in control of the train. Now, I know this attack sounds daring and risky, but it should not come as a surprise. Insurgency has been surging in Balochistan. This is a resource-rich province in Pakistan's west. Also the largest by area, Balochistan is the largest province in the country. It is home to resources like natural gas, coal and gold, yet the locals have never benefited from this richness. Politically, they have been persecuted by Pakistan's military, and financially their resources have been handed over to the Chinese. In fact, Balochistan is a key part of China's Belt and Road projects in Pakistan, projects that they have not benefited from. Hence the local outrage. There are a number of insurgent groups in this region. Last week, they announced a major move. All the Baloch armed groups decided to unify their commands, basically fight under a single military setup. And days later, this attack has happened. So like I said, it's not a surprise. Balochistan reported 150 attacks last year. It was 119% up compared to the year before. In fact, this very same train line has been targeted before. The service had been shut down for 2 months last year, but it was resumed in October 2024. I suspect there will be another shutdown after this. Either way, this is a massive challenge for Pakistan. Their military will have to flush out these fighters and free the hostages. The rugged terrain will make this operation very difficult. But even after that, questions will be asked about Pakistan's handling of Balochistan, about its failure to contain these groups. We will be tracking the story closely. Do you know what manus means? It is the Latin word for hand, and China has adopted it as the name for its latest AI agent. The Chinese manus promises to be handy. It can do multiple tasks at once, one prompt, and it can plan a trip for you or analyze your investment portfolio. Manus was launched earlier this month and it's already created a lot of buzz. But not everyone can use it yet. It's still invitation only. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT is getting anxious in the US. Not the makers, this time it's the bots who are anxious. And in Europe, they're building 4 AI gigafactories. That is the EU's answer to the US Stargate. As for India, it is racing to deal with an AI talent shortage. A shortage of 1 million professionals, apparently. Our next report has more.
Do you want someone to plan a trip to Japan, analyze stock options, create coursework for teachers, analyze insurance policies, all with a single prompt? Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, this is China's new AI agent. It's called Manus and it's a serious multitasker. But don't mistake it for a chatbot. It's being called the first general AI agent. Manus was developed by a Chinese startup, Monica. It was launched on March 6th. Since then, it's created a lot of buzz in the world of AI. Many even compared it to DeepSeek, calling it the next big name in AI. Right now, Manus is invitation only. You can only test the AI agent. According to Manus's website, it outperforms OpenAI's deep research model. But it has left the industry divided. Some call it a major breakthrough, claiming Manus goes further from mere chatbots. It shows China's dominance in the AI world. But some experts remain skeptical, and that's because Manus wasn't built from scratch. Also, it's prone to factual errors and execution failures. So China is racing to secure the lead in the AI race with more advanced models. And what is the United States doing? Well, its models are left anxious. I'm talking about ChatGPT. A new study shows that ChatGPT gets anxious quite literally. It mirrors human stress patterns and even responds to calming techniques like that of guided meditation and deep breathing. Guess the pressure to stay ahead is getting to it. But jokes aside, China and the United States are locked in an AI tussle, and Europe is scrambling to keep up. The European Commission is raising $20 billion. This is to build 4 AI gigafactories. It will be like a public-private partnership. Each gigafactory will contain 100,000 cutting-edge chips. They will be used to develop the most advanced, very large models that are in line with Europe's regulations. It is Europe's answer to the Stargate project, which is America's ambitious $500 billion AI venture. But there are a few hurdles here. Obtaining chips or technology won't be easy. There's also lack of electricity, especially on the scale that it's needed. Europe will have to figure out all of that. So where does this leave the world? AI is evolving rapidly from chatbots to general AI agents, from national strategies to global competition. But there's one thing everyone can agree on. The demand for AI talent is skyrocketing, and right now, most of the world is playing catch-up. A new report suggests by 2027, 2.3 million jobs could open up in India's AI sector. The AI talent pool will grow by over 1.3 million. But even then, India faces a crunch of 1 million workers. So China is pushing the boundaries of AI innovation. The US is facing the pressure to stay ahead. Europe is trying to secure its place in the AI landscape, and India is racing to train more professionals. But the real question is, where does this end? With AI evolving at lightning speed, with governments investing billions and companies testing the limits of what's possible, is the world ready for the next phase? A future where AI isn't just a tool, but a decision maker.
It is almost World Sleep Day. It will be celebrated on March 14 this year. Because as we sleepwalk towards it, let me ask you a question. How did you sleep last night? Did you stare at the clock, doom scroll in bed, or toss and turn? If you can relate, do know that you're not alone. The world over, 37% people struggle to sleep and 10% suffer from chronic insomnia. That is a global average. What about India? How is the world's most populous nation sleeping? Well, not very well. And we aren't the ones saying this. A new survey is. A survey conducted by Local Circles, a citizen engagement platform. According to this survey, 59% Indians get less than 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. For context, adults should get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep every night. In India, only 39% adults sleep for 6 to 8 hours. Another 39%, only 39% sleep for 6 to 8 hours. Another 39% get 4 to 6 hours. And 20% adults manage only about 4 hours of sleep. This is alarming. But why is it happening? Before you blame phone use, here is a disclaimer. As per the survey, only 6% Indians face sleep interruption due to phone calls or notifications. For the majority, for 72% people who get less sleep, this is the reason: waking up to use the washroom. It doesn't sound like much, but for most people, it is the biggest sleep disruptor. For about 25% Indians, a poor sleep schedule is another big problem, a schedule that changes regularly, punctuated by early mornings and late nights. The third biggest reason is external disturbance, like noises or mosquitoes. They regularly disrupt the sleep of 22% Indians. Of course, this problem is not limited to the three reasons we just mentioned. It is not limited to India either. All over the world, people find it difficult to get some shut-eye. And this is due to a range of factors. But the repercussions are mostly the same. When we sleep, our bodies and our brains get important work done. The body boosts its functions and the brain tidies up. Think of it as pruning bushes in a garden. It helps healthy bushes grow. It gets rid of dead leaves. It maintains day-to-day health of the plants. And this is exactly what the brain does when we sleep. It prunes connections. The things we learn, our memories, it strengthens the ones it wants to keep. It discards the ones it deems less important. For you, this means waking up with better memory, better thinking ability, creativity, and alertness. So when you don't get enough sleep, you miss this overnight cleanup. You wake up feeling slower. It can be hard to think straight. Plus, your body thinks that it is under stress. This increases inflammation, the immune system gets disrupted, the risk of common illnesses like cold and flu increases. And if this continues, serious medical conditions emerge, conditions like cancer, dementia, heart disease, diabetes. So little wonder that we are obsessed with sleep, our anxiety over it, our red light glasses, our sleep oil, sleep trackers, AI beds. All of it makes a $585 billion industry. That is the sleep industry, $585 billion. And yet, sleep remains elusive. Why is that? Experts say it's because we miss two key factors. First, sleep has little to do with how you fall asleep. It is less about your pre-sleep tea. It's more about the demands of your waking life. If you have two toddlers, or if you must cover a double shift, there is hardly a super special mattress that can help you. So instead of just jumping to fix it, first identify why you're losing sleep. Secondly, stop chasing a sleep ideal. There is no such thing as the 8-hour mark. It is a marketing myth, much like the 10,000 steps that you must walk in a day. Different people need different amounts of sleep. So instead of saying not enough or too much or not the right kind, find out what works for you. Because sleep is not a high-pressure challenge. Maybe once we accept that, we will stop losing sleep over sleep. Yesterday was a bad day for X or Twitter. The platform went offline for a couple of hours. Elon Musk later said it was a cyber attack. For users, this presented a new problem. When Instagram is down, you make jokes on X. When WhatsApp is down, you make jokes on X. But when X is down, where do you make jokes? Turns out you wait for it to come back. And that's what users did. Once the platform was back, it was a roast session for Musk and X. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Hundreds in Serbia protest against the country's public broadcaster. Dubai organizes iftar meals for foreign workers during the month of Ramadan, and Guatemala's volcano of fire erupts, forcing mass evacuations. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 2011, a massive earthquake hit Japan's Honshu region. More than 18,000 people were killed by the earthquake and the resulting tsunami. It also triggered a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear plant, leading to the second worst nuclear disaster in history. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
ചെറിയൊരു ഇൻ്റർവ്യൂ. ഓക്കെ. Take some good bits, otherwise I will speak to people.